Welcome to Math, Minecraft, and Computers, episode I30, Memory 2. If you recall, in the past, we built a JK flip-flop structure that would hold one bit, could also toggle that bit, and we could set and reset it. And it was based on a set, reset, latch, an SR latch. But you'll also remember that a while back I said, wouldn't it be great if we could put whatever number we wanted, starting with, say, bit 0 to bit 7, and put whatever we wanted on the front of this, and then move it to the back so that that was stored and remembered in this back set of lights. And then I could come up here and change these maybe to something different and store that as well. But you'll notice as soon as I change the front, the back changes as well. Well, that is our new quest. Can we build a device that will let us put some number or bit pattern in the front and then move it to the back and then change the front? Well, we can and we will. And the device of that, the first thing we're going to learn is more about memory. So let's go to Logisim. Here we are in Logisim. As I mentioned, we're going to need to look at the set reset flip-flop. As a quick review of that, you'll see that we have two NOR gates. They are wired in such a way that the output of the first NOR gate is the input of the other, and vice versa. And then what we do is we have a reset and a set. If I press the reset, then this comes down here. This is Q prime. If I press the set, then it moves back up to here, which is Q. You can think of this as our stored bit right here. Not this, but this one. Here, I reset the bit. Here, I set the bit. The issue that we have with this is, if you remember, for instance, off the bus, I don't have two different lines, and this would require me to have one line for the reset signal and another for the set. So our first thing is, well, how can we move this down to a single switch or input that we could call data? Well, that should be pretty obvious. What we're going to do is grab an inverter. We're going to put it right here. And then we're just going to connect it up to this line and down to this line. Once we've done that, we can remove this entirely and that as well. Now, when I hit the single one, it'll flip back and forth. So there's the value. Now you'll notice one thing is before, when this is now on, this is now our bit. So our Q moves from here down to here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to relabel this LED as Q. That's our bit. This one would stay Q prime. So now, when this is off, Q prime is on. You also recall the problem with the SR flip-flop is I should never have both lines on at the same time. So now I've solved that. I can do that. So this would be our bit that we would save, and this would be our front bit. But what we really want to be able to do is I want to be able to modify this without this actually toggling until I'm ready. So I want to have another input, say, that sits right here that says, I'm going to call this one enable, or write if you would like. Either one works. And I would just want to say that I can set whatever value I want up here. And then when I'm ready, I'll click that, and that value would transfer to here at that time. So we start to work on that. So if you think about what we might need for that, it's fairly simple structure. First of all, let's get our two inputs again. Instead of reset, we would then call this one data. So I'll get a new input, I'll move it down to here. I'll also call it data. And then we'll just take this enable that we have here and we'll move it down to this position somewhere here. Now let's talk about what it would take for this. So what we're saying is we want to be able to independently change this value as many times as we want without it affecting the final output over here. Think about what we might need. If you remember the JK flip-flop, we had something like this. We set that to be a 2-input gate. Now in this case, we want to do the same thing. We want to say, here's our data line, and it goes directly into this one. And then we'll leave our enable here for the time being. And then what we want to do is, since that is data, and we want the opposite side of our circuit to be the same, we're going to drag this out to here. We're going to get our inverter again, put it here, and then connect it up. This way, in this way. So now we have the exact same behavior we did before. I'll go ahead and drag these out to make it a little easier to see when they're active or not. There we go. So now you can see, just like above, it automatically flips back and forth whenever I press that. But the other thing that I can do is I can connect these two together, like we did with the center of the JK flip-flop when we wanted it to toggle. And now I can take this value, and if you do the same thing with data, you'll see nothing happens now, right? I've got an error. I get a red line over here to indicate there's some issue. So what I need to do is drag this to here. When this is enabled, these two sides of the gate are automatically set to the on state. Now I can change this where I want and do it. To make this obvious, I'm going to go ahead and set up 2 of these. Now when I click this enable, you'll notice what happens is Q comes on. Now I can change this. So when I enable this, whatever value is on there goes to Q. I turn this off, it moves down here. Only when that is on. So we've got it now, nothing happens because the center is not on. Now all we have to do is take our SR Latch that we have, and let's put a copy of it in front of this. Change these outputs instead of going to the lights. Then now go to these gates. Here and there. Our SR flip-flop, which is here, is now powered from these 2 gates instead of directly from our switch. We'll put a value on. Let's go ahead and just put a 0 on. I'm going to enable, and you'll see now that Q prime is here. And when I turn this on and enable, it flips back to this value. Q is down here again. That means the bit is on. And now you'll notice I can flip this and it doesn't change. Since our SR Latch has latched that value into here, and we have not enabled the 2 interior sides of the AND gate, I can no longer change that value. Only when I've enabled it. Now it will flip over the Q. I can turn that off and do the same thing. One of the keys you'll notice here, as long as this enable is on, it will act like a toggle. So if this were a very long pulse, let's say this value is changing something on the bus, and we want to enable it, say we stop here, we want to turn it on, and we click here, or we get a signal that says flip it, enable it, and then this value changes a couple times, let's say it ends up there, and then finally this ends, we've got it wrong. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that this is not enabled when we are selecting this. And that can be a little bit harder to do. We're going to do this a little bit different in Minecraft. We're going to use a monostable circuit. But there is a way that we can gather that. If you think about having 2 latches, this is a latch that operates. If I put another latch in front of this one, then I can set it so that the enable has to be turned off before any data is enabled. And that's pretty easy to do. So we're going to come over here. I'm going to grab my 2 inputs and put them over here. And now what we're going to start with is 2 OR gates. I'm going to put an OR gate here, and one down below here. And we're going to do the same thing that we did before. I'm going to bring this value from here, and it's going to go through an inverter, down to this one, to move that up to there. So that's our 2 outsides. I'm going to hit the 2 insides up that I did before. And that is going to go to our enable. And of course, this is going to be the data line. Now, obviously, right now, this is not too useful. Either gate will automatically enable itself. You can see that by, I'll drag a short wire out here so you can see. If I flip-flop back and forth, they're automatically, it doesn't matter which one I use. In fact, they can both be on. So now what we want to make sure is that we move that into a different gate, and this time it's going to be a NAND latch. I'm going to put the NAND gate here, make a copy of it and put it down here. And then since it is a latch, we want to do the same thing we always do with the latch. Bring this one here, It's going to plug into the input of the interior. This will do the same, like so. And then these connect here, just like this. And then we'll bring our outputs out here a little bit further. So now I've created a NAND latch over here. And so we can see how this now behaves. As you see, when I flip data, the data 0 state sets this one. The data 1 state sets that one. And the enable has nothing to do with it right now. Except as you can see, when enable is turned on, I can do whatever I want with data, and it doesn't matter. I have to have the enable turned off for this to flip, turn enable back on, and I can't change that value. So this verifies that enable has to be off before the value. If this is the bus, and the data is moving on the bus and changing as gates are flipping values and states, that's okay. We finally arrive at a value we like, say this, and then we have to enable. So it doesn't really matter whether enable is on or off. You just have to make sure you have a cycle. It has to turn off, and then maybe data stabilizes, and then you're back to here. So that's what we do. So now you would what do we need to do? Well, we need to take this whole circuit that we built over here, grab it, copy it, and it's going to move to this position right here. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to connect this one to the interior of this, and this one is going to go to the interior of this AND gate. And we drag this down one, like so. So I'm going to bring that to here, and it goes there and there. So that is, you see, coming from the enable signal comes to these outside. So instead of having our data, remember our data is selected here now, we want our enable to go to the two outsides. So here we enabled on the inside gates for this circuit. Now we enable on the outside because our inside is actually the data. Okay, now what happens? If I set data, you can see nothing changes. Nothing is changing over here when I've got data set. I'll leave it on 0 and I'll hit the enable, because we've added another SR latch to this. So now, this is actually our bit. This is Q up here, and this is Q prime. So it's Q, and then we go to Q prime here, and then to Q. So every time we add a set of flip-flops, SR latches, that goes back. So now we just simply need to relabel these, and now we'll have exactly what you would expect. Turn this, flip this enable, and you'll see that we have that bit set it to 0 in enable, and it's down here. So really you can think of from memory, you can think of just deleting this entirely. We don't need it. This is our bit. This is our stored bit right here that we're saving. The difference between these two is, if you remember down here, I can flip this and nothing changes until I enable it. Problem is, with enable, I can change it all I want. So our enable signal has to be very short. Over here, once I set a value, and I can change that all I want, nothing happens, of course. And then when I enable it, that value moves to the bit through this latch. That has now latched it. But now I can change this all I want. Even with it enabled, nothing happens until I finally turn this off. And now I can re-enable it so this value can change again, and then finally re-enable it and it moves. So this is called a D-type latch. This particular circuit right here is a D-type latch. All right, now you can see over here in wiring we have a clock. You recall that we want a clock because we want to synchronize everything together. Down here in the memory section of Logisim, you'll have the D-type flip-flop that we built up here. The D-type flip-flop is here. Now this is the clock, this is data, and our enable is down here. If I hold on, you see it's got the D label, and here's our enable. Now they also give you pins to automatically set it to 1 if that pin is high, or to set it to 0 if that pin is high. So what we do is we take our clock, and we put it into this position here. There's the clock. We take our data, So I'm just going to copy this one. And we put it into the D for data. And then we take our enable from here and we put it in the center down here. And I'll put our output to here. LED on the end of that so we can actually see what it does. The difference between this is you recall we have the same state here. Data's off, enable's off, and we turn data on, turn data on. As soon as I enable, this value is set. So it's set. Let me do that to get the same state we had before. So here's what we have, turn that on, enable, and that moves on. If you see down here when I enable, it doesn't turn on yet. And the reason for that is because I'm waiting on the clock. So until this clock changes, I don't change the value. So now we have 3. We're waiting on the clock. We have to have enable. So that means the way we might do this is we might have this flip-flopping as data is moving on the bus. Maybe you were setting some other value somewhere in the computer here, and we don't want this to react. And we want to make sure, though, at the same time, suppose this is a value that we want to add to another one, we want to make sure we get them set. Before we do the add, I don't want some random value in this bit when I enable it. I want to set it. So I'm going to set it for 1. I'm going to enable it, but nothing actually changes until I get the clock pulse. So that is how we would achieve that together. So the best way to illustrate that is I'm going to make another one of these bits right here. I'm going to set it down here. It's got its own data and has its own enable, or it could. In this case, I'm just going to use the same enable. And then they share the clock like this. Now you can see that I have a data value here, I have a data value here. They can be set independently of each other. And then when I enable them, the same thing. They have the single enable. So with the clock off, nothing happens. Let's say I want this one to be a 0 and this one to be a 1. And then I enable it. Nothing happens until I get the clock, and there it is. So the clock would be running by itself automatically. And we can do that in here is say ticks enable, and I can set the frequency. I've got it nice and slow. Here we go. Now, the clock is ticking. I set my values to whatever I want here. Maybe we're going to say set this one to 1 and this one to 1 as well, which it already is. And now when I enable, I have to wait on the clock. There it is. Now I would unenable this, and I would change my values again. Let's set them both to 0. I'd enable, and then of course I have to wait on the clock. So even if I enable it, and these values are changing with the clock, when the enable is on and the clock triggers, it's this. So now we're back to this behavior, except when we have the addition of the clock. So how are we going to do that over here in our simplified version of the circuit? So let's take this, and we'll drag it over here, and we're going to hook it up to that same clock. How can we do that? Well, obviously we just need another one of these AND gates. I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to face it to the west. And then I will drag it up, and instead of this being the enable, it'll come over to here. And I'll go to there. Now I'll bring this enable to this side, and I'm going to bring the clock to here. Now you can watch this AND gate. It is only on both when the clock is on and the enable is set. So by turning the enable off, this is disabled, or let me stop the clock here real quick. With the clock on and enable off, this doesn't come on. With enable on and the clock off, it doesn't come on. The only time it does is here. So now I've got a data value over here. Let's go ahead and set this to 1. I enable everything that I would want to set. We set these to 0 so everything changes. And then when I hit the clock, it toggles over here. So only when the clock is actually on. By doing an additional AND gate and adding the clock and the enable together, I can get the same circuit to do it. So I don't use this enable anymore. I'm using this one. So we have 2 ways to do that. We can definitely do that, or if you think the other way that we could do that is if this enable pulse, or if we're simply going to use the clock, then it needs to be short. It needs to have a monostable circle in it. So we will now proceed to do the same work in Minecraft in the next episode. So this is the D type flip-flop. And this is how it hooks up with a clock, with the enable and the data and the clock all set here. But there you have it, D-type flip-flop, and that would end this episode of Math Minecraft Computers I30. If you like what you're seeing, click the thumbs up. If you want to see more, make sure you press the bell, get subscribed, so you can see the next episode where we will build this circuit in Minecraft. Until then, keep on learning. Emeroy out.